anything else about it. In fact, they had a system in Britain, for example, that when you worked, you were called a serf. That is, you didn't own the land, you just worked there. And they began to tax the people who owned the land based upon the number of people that lived on their land. And as you know, in many of those homes, that they had thatched roofs. That is, that they took grass and things, and that's how they made the roof. And you can go through Kent and Wales and those places in southern Britain, and you'll see these homes that are literally hundreds of years old and have these thatched roofs. But of course, that's a little bit dangerous because they burn. And when the taxes would come, and there were people living on their land, and the landowner, the baron, or the duke, or whoever it was that owned them, that was in control of the land for the king, when he would be charged for those people, he couldn't afford it, and so they would burn them out. That is, that they would go and they would light the roofs on fire, and they would burn them out. And so we use to this day, we talk about a person being fired. That is, that when they're kicked off the land, or when they're kicked out of their job, they're being fired, because that's, and you may remember in the movie with Tom Kidman, Nicole Kidman and Thomas Cruise, and it called The Way, I can't remember the name. Anyway, it starts out where his far and away. It starts out where his family is being fired. They're being burned out, and he's laying on the table, and if I could just make it to America. And he comes to America. And now America is different because it's not under that controlled system. It's a system in which a person is judged not because of who they are, but because of what they do for others. That is a free enterprise system in which they can go into business for themselves, and they can come like Andrew Carnegie, can come with $6 in his pocket at age 12 and become the richest man in the world. And the examples go on and on as to getting to a place where there is freedom and a person is honored not because of the group that they belong to, but because they wanted to become Americans. Now, what is an American? An American is a person who believes those certain ideals. Tonight, I'm going to go into a greater length about an observation that I have been able to make in recent years with the counsel of other people I admire, to understand that everything in life is either physical or spiritual. Physical things, you can say a painting is physical, but the beauty that it gives off is spiritual. What's the difference? Spiritual things you can't quantify, you can't weigh it, you can't get a pound of it. And so, you begin to ask yourself, leadership. What is leadership? Leadership is spiritual. You can't buy a pound of leadership. Momentum, you've all been to a ball game, and you can see the momentum shift. Why? Because that's spiritual. You can go on. Love is spiritual. Liz and I are going through this new experience called grandparenting, and we have a couple of little granddaughters, and they really, really like me. And so at Christmas time, there was a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old and a newborn. And if you've ever lived in a house with those situations, there's lots of chaos. And so the phone rang, and I had to take the phone call. And so I stepped in the side room and closed the door, and the 4-year-old saw me go in and close the door. And she jumped up and she ran across the room. And her mother and her grandmother said, "You leave Granddad alone. You leave Granddad alone." Didn't slow her down a bit. She hit that door, pounded on that door. "Granddad, it's me. It's me, Granddad. Granddad, it's me. It's me, Granddad. It's Fame, Granddad. Granddad, it's Fame." She knew the heart of the person on the other side of that door. That if no further explanation was required, all she had to say, "It's me." And just if it's me, he will open that door, which I did. And she leapt into my arms. I rescued her from these disciplinarians that were about to descend upon her. And I was laying in bed the next morning just thinking of the overwhelming love, just this ocean of love that I have for this little thing that 48 months ago didn't even exist. And yet it didn't diminish any love for her mother or her grandmother. Why? Because love is spiritual. Now, the thing is, you cannot achieve spiritual ends with physical tools. You cannot, there isn't enough physical relationships to achieve love. What is spiritual? The scripture says that the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace. And so when a person says, you know, if we just had a new kitchen, we'd have peace in this house. No, you wouldn't. You cannot achieve spiritual ends with physical tools. Let's back it around. You can see it clearly. Let us suppose we're going to take these spiritual tools, love and joy and peace, and we need a new church. And so we're going to go in the parking lot and we're going to sit around here and we're going to have all the love and all the joy and all the peace. You cannot build a physical building with spiritual tools. In the same manner, you cannot achieve spiritual ends with physical tools. And the ability to tell the difference, there's a word for that, in my opinion. It's called wisdom. Wisdom is the capacity to tell the difference. So a person who thinks that if he gets a new Corvette and a new boat and a new job, that he will suddenly be happy and his family will be happy. No, it won't. No, it won't. Because happiness, love, joy, that's a spiritual thing. And you cannot achieve spiritual ends. Now, in that context, why is it that there's a little place called America? And that place has produced more wealth than all the rest of the globe throughout all recorded history up until the time that that nation came on earth. Everything that you can think about that you like. A light bulb. Can you think what it would be like without light bulbs? There would be no motion picture industry. So the light bulb. The telegraph, the ability to send communication. The telephone. Now let's just talk about that in a second. In the basement of the U.S. Capitol is the old Supreme Court chamber, and there's a plaque on the wall. And when I was growing up, we had to learn what was the first telegraph message ever sent in America. And the plaque describes it because from that room, the old Supreme Court chamber, to Baltimore, Maryland, 40 miles away, the first telegraph message was ever sent. And it was this: what hath God wrought? In other words, what has God done here? That was the first telegraph message. It was sent from that room. Now, I was downtown, 15 blocks away on 15th Street of Washington, D.C., and I'm walking to lunch. And I look over at a building, and there's a plaque on the building behind all the bushes. Well, Jim mentioned I like history and things, so I was curious. I wonder what that plaque says. So I go through the bushes, and I look at the plaque, and it says this. It says, from this building across Franklin Park was the first wireless transmission in the history of man. Don't tell me. The first wire transmission? 15 blocks later, the first wireless transmission? We got a whole planet. Why is it it's taking place here? For thousands of years, people would hope to fly. I represented Dayton, Ohio. Two little folks, his father was a pastor. They moved around from Iowa to Missouri. They ended up in Dayton, Ohio. Wilbur and Orville Wright. Orville died in 1948. That's not all that long ago, even though some of you might think so. It's not that far back. They invented the airplane. They came up with an idea. That is, flat on the bottom, curved on the top. When the air goes over the top, it will create a vacuum called lift, and that will allow the plane to rise. From that idea, anybody in the world can make airplanes. The global positioning system. Be able to tell where you are. There isn't an airplane on the planet or a ship in the sea that doesn't use the global positioning system at any time. I commented on just last night. We went from the Coliseum down to where we're staying. And in California, it takes a certain amount of skill to drive for where you want to go. I mean, it literally told us to get off, go down one block, make a U-turn and come back and get on I-5 or something. I thought, my goodness, I couldn't have figured that out. But it just told us where to go. Now that wonderful, wonderful thing is advising, the global position is advising pilots and truckers and tankers and ships all over the world, all day, every day. Why? Because Americans invented rockets, that made satellites, that had communication, that could sit there and just you and I, when we go out from here to try to find the nearest McDonald's, will tell us in a second. Why doesn't every other nation on earth do that? The internet. You know what it would be like to live without the internet? I'll tell you a quickie. About 2 years ago, I got a smartphone for the first time. I had it for about a month. And I flew to Kansas City. And when I rented a car, they said, would you like Kansas City, Missouri? I was going across the border to Nebraska. And so they said, would you like a map? And I said, no, thank you, because I was going to Nebraska. And I had my telephone, my smartphone with its global positioning on it. And so I took off happy as a lark. And after a little while, I started to chirp like it was dying. And so I checked all the connections to make sure it was working. Bottom line is it had a bad chip in it and it died. And suddenly my life came to an end. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know who I was going to see. I couldn't call them to tell them I wasn't coming. And suddenly everything that was of value had now suddenly disappeared. And so I thought, well, what do I do? So I go to Civilization, so I find the nearest filling station, gas station. They don't have a phone either. And they don't have a phone book, because a phone book is all online. But I didn't know where I was going. So I wasn't anything I could look up. And I thought, I didn't have this thing a month ago. And now I can't function without it. The bottom line was I had to give up my whole day, turn around, trace my steps back to a phone, and they swapped it out and all. What is my point? What America has done has made it possible for people to communicate, to keep in touch, to follow what's going on. I have a friend who lost his wife this morning. This morning when I woke up, I looked on my iPad, and it said a personal note to 5 of us, and it said, she is with him, 4 a.m. His wife had died last night. Now, all of the changes that take place, it used to be that missionaries would go off and you would never see them for 6 months. And they would send back letters that would take 3 to 4 weeks to get here. Now people can Skype all night, every night. Who did that? Americans did all that. Now, what is so different about this place? I'll tell you what it is, and it's critical. It believes that our rights don't come from the land that we're on. They don't come from the bloodline of the baron or the duke that has inherited the land. It doesn't come from the tribe that has taken power in Syria, the Alawites that have controlled it for 47 years. It doesn't come from the tribe that controls some other area. Americans said this: we hold these truths. Now let me tell you something. We have to stop and we have to define the word truth. You have to know what truth is. We read in the scriptures where it says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And you say, well, what does that have to do if I believe in God? People are going to say, yeah, I really don't have to believe in God. I can be a good salesman. I can be a good businessman. I don't need to believe in God. No, without God, there's no starting point. And with no starting point, there can be no measurement. If you have a 13-inch ruler and I have a 15-inch ruler and you have an 18-inch ruler and there is no truth among them, then you lay out 3 feet, it would be one length. You lay out 3 feet, it'd be another length. There has to be a common standard. And in America, they established one. They said very simply, it's going to be God. That's what we're going to do. Not on a person, not on a tribe, not on a group, but based upon Him. And so that is what truth is. Let me describe it one more time. If I say this platform here is 38 feet wide, and you say it's 36, and you say it's 41, we can all argue about what we think it is, but if we measure it, the measurement then becomes truth. That is exactly what it is. Everything else is just opinion. And you can only build based upon truth. And what is truth? The scriptures tell us God is truth. Everything else is just opinion. So I can tell you that you can get to heaven by beating yourself upside down and crawling on your knees 5 pounds and all that sort of thing. Everybody says, well, all religions are alike. Let me just tell you, all religions are alike. All religions are alike. They're all ways that you try to do something in order to make yourself qualified to supposedly spend nirvana or to reach paradise or do something. But God is truth. And God said that I am the way. That means anything else isn't going to work. I don't care how many, God love you. You can beat yourself silly like they do in the Philippines, or crawl on your knees for up these steps, or you can bow down 5 times a day as you do all over. All that's, it doesn't affect him because he's truth. And he said, I am the way. So you try to come up with another one, it isn't going to work. I don't care how many times you say it. I am the truth. I am the organizing unit. No man comes to God but me. So our founding fathers said, we're going to do this. We're going to build a nation founded on that truth. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That is, if you're not narrow-minded and bigoted, you'll be able to see this. It's self-evident that all men are created. All right? People say, well, that's kind of narrow-minded, is that God made all these people. I think it happened over billions of years. Let me just tell you, while we're on a little, if I may deviate here just for a quick little aside, that is that scientifically, if something is scientific, you can test it. Whenever a person doesn't want to test something, that means that it's not scientific. Now, I'll tell you very simply, following Christ is not scientific. It's faith. And he asks us to do it by faith. Give it. Other people have faith as well. One of them is that by a series of accidents you got here. Now that takes more faith than I have. I don't have that much faith. But here's a question. If you just ask the question, there are 7 classifications of life. There's fish and fowl and vertebrates and invertebrates and mammals. And in order to, according to the principles of evolution, you travel from one to the other over time. That over millions of years, you go from one to the other. Okay, let's say that's true. Then who snapped their finger one day and said, nobody in between any of those 7 groups is allowed to be around? Why is it that we don't have any of them? That every animal that you can identify fits into one of those 7 categories. None of them halfway. There's no fish with wings. There's no halfways. Number 1, there are none today. And number 2, there are none in the fossil records. There's no place where we ever see anything. So my question is this. Suppose there was only one a year, and this was millions of years, wouldn't there be millions of these things? Wouldn't we be able to find one? But if you ask that question, they never answer the question. They immediately go to attack you. Oh, you're just a narrow-minded Bible thumper. Oh, okay, let's say that I am. Answer the question. No, you're just narrow-minded. You think you're a flat earther. You just think, okay, maybe I am. Answer the question. The fact is that truth overcomes error. Error cannot tolerate truth. So error has to shut down truth. And that's why there is an attack on truth, which is a spiritual attack. America is based on truth and is engaged by definition in a spiritual warfare because truth is under attack by error. Now let me explain again. Truth does not fear error. Truth does not fear untruth because untruth has no value. For example, let us say that you're defending and you're prosecuting a man who drove in and stole a ATM machine. And his defense lawyer says, Oh, he didn't steal that. No, sir. He was up in Oregon, and he was having dinner with his sister, and here's the receipt from when he had dinner with his sister. And she can make up every lie in the world. You don't care, because at the end of it, you're going to show a video of him pulling into the bank. You're going to show him backing up to the ATM. You're going to show a picture of his face as he looks down into the ATM, his fingerprints as he pushes the buttons, and as he wraps the chain around. And the truth will overcome error. Now here's the point. The only way that error can survive, it has to prevent the presentation of truth. So she has to do everything possible to prevent you from telling that in court, because the only way she can win is she has to prevent because truth overcomes error. And that's why you can pray down here on the street corner or at the governor's inaugural in the name of anybody in the world, and nobody will care. You can wave the fawns, and you can wave eagle feathers, and you can pray in the name of the great guru, and nobody will say a word. But if you pray in the name of Jesus Christ, all hell will break loose. Why? Why is that? Because Christ is truth. And error cannot tolerate truth. And so truth is always under attack. I can speak on a college campus till I'm blue in the face. I can say the most stupid, irresponsible things in the world, and I'll even get followers and get standing ovations. But you begin to talk about truth, what God says about individual accountability to Him, who we are, and you will be viciously attacked and abused. Now, that's what America was founded on, the Word of God. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal, and are endowed. Now get this. Are endowed. Your rights don't come from who's in office. Your rights don't come from the Supreme Court. Your rights come from God. That is why America is different from any other nation. Any other nation. A Jew knows that he can be chased from any country in the world. If he can just get under the protection of the American flag, he'll be safe. Because America is committed to honoring, let's go through it again, all endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. America believes the purpose of government is to do that. Protect life and liberty and your right to pursue. How is that different from every other nation? Every other nation says your rights come from who's in the majority, who's in control. And if I'm in control, then I can take from this person and give to that person. Now, when you do that, two bad things happen. Number one, the person that earned it doesn't get to enjoy it, and he's discouraged from producing. The person who didn't earn it has something he didn't pay for, and he says, why should I work if I get it? And so the degree to which a government does that is the degree to which it makes everyone poor. Now, under the American system, that should never happen at all. Unfortunately, it's happening to a very, very great degree. And that's where you come in. It's important for you to understand that you are not Hispanic. You're not African American. You're not gay or sad. You are an American. And an American is not anything else. Stop and think. I have 4 children. Can you imagine the absurdity at Christmas of my daughter walking up to her brother? Hello, I'm Meredith from Texas. And her brother says, hello, I'm Jonathan from South Carolina. And then their other sister, I'm Elizabeth from Tennessee. Now you're the parents, you think, are you people crazy? God looks at us as His children. And anybody who wants to get you off because you're Texan, or because you're South Carolinian has a motive other than the fact of who you are. And the purpose of America, that we didn't care, for most of my lifetime even, people did not know or care anything. Liz was going through her Facebook this past week with certain people in her class in high school. And she was saying how that now they have these little categories as to who they're in. She said, we grew up together. We knew each other all the time. We never thought about them in any categories. Now, why is it so important that you be separated out to be groups? Because there are only two sources of rights. Only two. One is your rights come from God because He made you. The other comes because of the group that you belong to. And if it's the group, let me warn you, everyone is a minority. Everyone is a minority. If your rights come from the majority, everyone is vulnerable. Therefore, America was a place that you came here, we didn't care what your background is, what your bloodline is, we don't give a hoot. You were swept out of the ocean in the middle of the Pacific, but now you're an American. And that means that you can go into business for yourself, you can provide a blessing for yourself, you can do things for other people. And that principle has allowed it to create all this wealth from other places. If we deviate from that, and we think that we're entitled to privileges based upon some other category, that is un-American. And the degree to which it does things un-American is the degree to which it then creates poverty. So our goal here is to understand. Can you imagine going up, hello God, I am a Syrian African American. If God would say, no, you're not. You're my child. I died for you. Who cares about all that? And that's the way we should be in this country. That you are given opportunities to reward, to bless people, and the tragedy that your family went through in Vietnam, the tragedy that your family went through in Germany, the background that your family went through when it was brought to this country 300 years ago, that's nice table conversation if you want to engage in it, but there's no excuse for it. It doesn't mean anything. The fact that you lost your job last week, that's unfortunate. Today is today. The fact that your grandparents did something 3 generations ago, today is today. And in America, we have opportunity based upon the fact that God made you. Final point is this. When we've traveled the country, people often want to run up to us and say, I've been to America, I've been to America. Well, what do you do when somebody you don't know looks at you and is all excited, I've been to America? How do you engage in conversation? Well, Liz came up with an answer to that, and she began to ask, was there anything that surprised you about America? Or what was the most startling thing or unexpected thing about America? The answer that came back more than anything else is this. In America, you don't have walls around your property. And of course, coming from the Midwest, where we've never ever seen a wall around any property ever, that was interesting and novel. Now, why is that? Let me tell you why it is. Because America was built on opportunity. It was founded on the Word of God and the 10 Commandments. And the 10 Commandments were printed on every public building and in every school classroom. And it says in there things like you shouldn't steal. So if everybody's taught not to steal, then you won't have to have policemen standing at the door of your school because they're taught you're not supposed to steal, you're not supposed to kill. But one that's really, really important is number 10. It says this. Thou shalt not covet. Now, what does covet mean? Covet means that I want what you have. And Americans have never been that way. They've never, in most countries of the world, people were like that. If they had an opportunity to take something, they'd take it. So the only safety they had was that they had to put walls around their property. And they had to put cut glass or something on top of it. Because people would, in America, it'd be wide open. Didn't make any difference. Because when people saw a nice, beautiful home, they didn't say, I want that home. They would say, someday, I'm going to work hard enough that I would like to have a home like that. We were in a beautiful country in Central America with a very good friend of mine, the former Attorney General of the nation. We went out to eat. And as we are stopped at the restaurant, the girls go in to eat. Rosa and Liz go in to eat. And Juan Edgar and I are standing there talking and talking. and talking. And finally I said, why don't you think we ought to, yeah, just a minute. And then we'd go ahead and talk some more. And, yeah, okay, one nigger, the restaurant's right there. We're here now. No, just a minute. He kept it up until finally somebody materialized. You probably understand this. Somebody materialized out of nowhere. He reaches it, he gives him money, and we go in to eat. What did he do? He had somebody watch his car the whole time that we were having dinner. Why? Because people wanted to have his car. Not just a car like it, to have his car.